Finally back here, ready to start some mixed media stuff on this. So I've got my trace monotype completed. I know that I'm going to use some watercolor paints for this, and because I'm going to be using some watercolor paints, which is considered a wet medium, I am going to tape my print down to like a sturdy. This is just like a piece of thick mat board. A lot of times I'll use like masonite, or I'll use something similar to that. But if you're only going to use dry media on this, you don't have to necessarily tape it down. A lot of times when you use wet media, that moisture will absorb into the paper fibers. It activates the sizing in the paper, and what then happens is, sorry, I'm just trying to adjust my screen here. There we go. My camera, rather. It causes that paper to swell, and when it swells, it basically starts to create a new memory, right? It just kind of does whatever it feels like when it dries back. And so usually you get buckling and curling and all this stuff. So again, if you're going to be doing like watercolors, you're going to be doing like, acrylic paint that you thin down with water or anything like that to work over this, consider taping your piece down. But again, if it's all dry media, no worries. There are times when you can like create a good piece. It'll get all wrinkled and curled up, and then you can like flatten it back out later. But boy, if you can eliminate that need to go back to it later and just keep it nice and flat and straight from the get-go, then you're in good shape. Okay. So I'm going to worry about my dry media first. I want my wet media to be kind of the last thing that I work with. So I'm going to think about my collage stuff, right? So I had these gears that I found out in an old magazine, and I've been collecting for a long time. I know I want to use these. It's something that shows up a lot in my artwork. It has to do kind of with how I feel like I function as an artist. Definitely machinistic. I'm very I try to think like the machine, right? Like be repetitive. This is an old pour painting that I did that I didn't like too much, and I cut different parts of it out, and so I found this in one of my bins, and I thought there's some really beautiful things in here that kind of remind me of sort of that astronomy, space, galaxy type thing. It's something I really enjoy. In my brainstorming, I ended up with colors, representative colors like blues and greens. And so again, I had this like old watercolor wash paper that I had just sitting around. So I decided, I'll cut that up and use that. And then the last thing I have here is, I pulled this out of a National Geographic magazine, I think, some kind of magazine, with the star situation. So I think I'm going to use that too. So what I'm going to go about doing now is just kind of like figuring out where I'm going to arrange these types of things, but I'm also going to be using colored pencils, markers, different things like that. So I think first what I want to do is think about how I'm going to treat this floating figure. I think that boy element, I'm going to use some different colored pencils on, and I'm going to start just by laying down some yellow. I like to work with primary colors as much as possible. So I'm just going to use this yellow to kind of get a base layer of color down, and then I'm going to work over it with my blues and greens because they are analogous colors and they look good together. Rarely do artists come up with an idea and stick with it faithfully. Like, it's a journey. Most of us become inspired by something and then begin to realize that maybe we need to make some choices. If, something occurs to you as you're working and you're like, I want to try this out, do it. Be impulsive. That's okay. It's your chance to do this. I'm just going to do a little modeling here, like kind of shade this in. And create a little bit of dimension for this kid so he doesn't just look so flat. So I'm not really looking off of the image. I suppose I could, but I just kind of generally know what his skull is going to be looking like and where the temples are and kind of the shadows and where they would exist and things. But I'm just going to go with like a 3-tone on this. When I work in colored pencil, I try to work light and build up. So you see that I don't use a pinch or grasp necessarily. I get way back on it and I just control it by dragging it over the paper. It makes for cleaner marks. I'm gonna get this side of the face a little more saturated though with color. For me, it's better to build up slow. It gets that pigment ground into the tooth of the paper better. You could use crayons, oil pastels, watercolors, markers, doesn't matter to me. I want you to experiment with mixed media, collage. The printmaking part of this was easy, right? We got that information transferred. We didn't have to think too much about it except for composition. Didn't have to draw necessarily. And so my hope is that you'll be able to make some creative decisions now that you have the imagery on there. And you can do something maybe that you would surprise yourself with. Create something that you're proud of. Just going to take my blue here and deepen those darker recesses in here to kind of get darker shadows. And I might use that to reinforce some of the contours as well. Kind of want this to come through, so I'm not going to shade through it too much. Kind of like that transparency idea or that repetition. Working with ballpoint pen over the top here to just make it a little more bold, and you know, because I have oil pastel on there and colored pencils, sometimes it's hard to mark over it, so I'm having to push a little bit harder, maybe go over some of the marks a few times. Just gonna bold up my contours. I might move to a Sharpie because I know that'll probably lay better over the top. Or not, maybe it won't. Try the other side. There we go. Probably not going to add all those contours down there because, again, I want that transparency thing going on. I might leave some of the tracing on there, but a lot of it I'm going to cover up because I'm just going to use it to kind of get a base layer down, you know, and get stuff mapped. Just going to work loose. Use different types of line work and texture and stuff. For those eyes, I am going to have to use the ballpoint. Get in there real tight. And I'd like those to pop a little bit more, so I might go in and paint those later. Okay. So I think as I move down, I'm just going to kind of like do some things to differentiate the color choices, because I'd like to separate this one image of the boy from the other a little bit, so I'm using a warmer color. But I'm going to lay it on light, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to shade over the top of it with a heavier, darker color that's going to be warm. So that way I get a little separation between them. We'll try some orange in there. Kind of wanting this upper part to be more imaginative, floaty, you know, colorful, playful, because this is more concrete, a little heavier, you know. Definitely reminiscent of like that family portrait idea. So maybe this is becoming about childhood to some degree. Which I always tell my students in the 300 class, you should be nurturing your inner child in this course. Allowing yourself to be impulsive and try new things. Not worrying about what other people think about it. Think about that enchantment that we felt when we were second and third graders. Life was still exciting. We didn't have to pay bills, taxes. Drop a little bit of yellow in there. Do some highlighting. You can see just by using like a limited color palette, you can get a pretty rich look. Sometimes I'll go ahead and use just the 3 primaries and I can get a nice color palette going. I'm going to flesh these out a lot more. I just don't want to make a 3-hour video for you all. So I'm going to work on certain sections post and then come back. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and start thinking about my collage elements, right? So I got to figure out how to get this into this shape. So one way I could do, like if I wasn't going to do wet medium, I could actually cut this out and then glue this on top of it. That would be nice and easy, but I've kind of made this more challenging for myself because I am going to be doing some painting and I've mounted it. So I am going to, let's see, I'm going to create some kind of like a transfer for this. Yes. Let's see. Just going to grab a regular piece of paper here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace out my information I have. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of determine where my corners are. So I'm just looking through here. You could use a light box, you could use tracing paper, wax paper to do stuff like this. Just tracing around my information. So a couple of different things I can do with this, like I can use this as a stencil. Just just gonna look under real quick. Looks like I have a little information right here for that kid, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Line it back up. Probably would have been wise to tape it down, but alas, here I am. I'm gonna go ahead and get this a little tighter around this female character. There we go. So now I've got a pretty good feel about how that needs to go. So what I'm gonna do now, again, a straight edge would probably be awesome, but this is straight enough. Okay. So what I could do is I could do another trace monotype. Like I could flip this over and I could apply media, right, to, you know, like something like a white oil pastel or something. And then I could lay it over and I could trace it over and then that would transfer here. But I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tape these two together. I like that pretty well. Just going to tape these two together right here. I'm going to tape the corner down to my mat so it doesn't move. Then I'm going to tape this down here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut through both pieces of paper with my X-Acto knife. And I may not have a perfectly clean edge, right, when I collage this on, but that's okay because I'm coming back later with, like I said, some water and painting media. And so I can do some stuff to crisp it up later if I need to. But I want to get it on there now so that I can kind of get a good feel for what my atmosphere is going to look like before I start progressing to my other figures. If you do it this way, if you choose to use a technique like this, it's a good idea to go over your marks, like cut twice, so you don't have to rely on a singular cut, or to just double check and make sure that you made it through everything. And make sure you're cutting on something that's safe to cut on. This is similar to a jigsaw collage technique that I use quite a bit. It's pretty fun. I'll have to show you all that sometime. Let's see what we have. Yeah, I probably should have double cut, but it seems like it's okay. So now I've got like one of each. So, you know, that could inspire me to do a lot of crazy cool stuff. But what I'm going to do, see what we look like here on top of, and this is what I love about collage medium. You know, this gives us an opportunity to say, what's it look like when I drop a universe behind this guy? If I don't like it, I throw it away, right? I don't have to paint that out and make all these decisions. I'm digging it. Looks good to me. What I'm going to do is just use a little bit of glue stick to start, and just to get it tacked, like especially around my contours. I like to do this because it kind of enables you to like position a little bit before it dries. It's a little more forgiving than like white glue sometimes. So I'll get that stuck down. Oh, I'm happy. Looks like maybe I missed a corner up here, so I'll try to patch that in. And what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go with some white glue. I'm going to put a whole bunch on, just a little bit. And then instead of keeping it gloppy like that, I'm going to use a very small amount of water with a brush, and I'm going to brush it back and forth like this, just so it's nice and smooth, kind of like paper mache. Then I'm going to smooth it down, get it as flat as possible. Sometimes I'll even go back over it that way. I've got a little bit of glue left here, but I'm going to pull this up. And you could make this like ahead of time. Some people prefer things like Mod Podge. You know, you want to spend that money, go ahead, but white glue is perfectly fine. Okay. And you don't necessarily have to do it this way, right? Sometimes the stick glue's perfectly fine. You can use that. This is just a method I prefer. Okay, so we've got that going on. I think I'm going to go ahead and worry about this right here. Luckily, I have some leftover universe, so I'm just going to do like I'm going to do a tear across this, because I know if I like glue a torn piece on there, it's not going to be so visible, like as if it were just a straight line. So organic marks, wabi-sabi type stuff, intentionally imperfect things help us to, well, hide imperfections. There, I just don't want it to wrinkle. Okay, cool. Clean out my brush. All right, so now we're moving down. Okay, so I think, looks like I need to get a little bit more under there. There we go. Let's put some straight glue on that corner. It's being stubborn. Try not to get too much on my figures. I think what I'm going to do with this thing here is I think I'm going to like create some sort of celestial bodies, right? And like, you know, stars or whatever out of it. So I'm going to set this aside, let it dry a bit. I'm just going to like find some of the coolest passages that I like in here. Like, I really enjoy this area. Thicker paper, so I'm going to be a little more aggressive. Collage aesthetic really informs my professional work quite a bit. I enjoy working with paper. I enjoy thinking of my X-Acto knife as kind of like a drawing device. Like, I like to think about when I'm cutting, like really I'm kind of drawing lines with my knife. So I'm just kind of doing these like little explodey things. That's a little stubborn area. I'm going to cut through twice. There we go. Okay. I'm just gonna like trim this here, 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 here. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to make these look like rays of light coming off of the star. So I kind of left them long so I could trim them down. Maybe curl this around a little bit more like so. Sometimes I'll tape my stuff down too when I cut it, just craftsmanship, orientation. There we go. I think I'm going to go ahead and curve this off this way, like that, and I'm going to curve this one off. Okay, in here a little bit, change that shape just a touch. Just make sure that I'm happy and satisfied with the shape of my star. Bring this in just a little bit more, kind of change the shape more. I'd like this to be skinnier out here. There we go. I'm digging that. Always kind of like to see what it's going to look like first before I decide. I feel like it's kind of big, so I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. I'm going to make it smaller. Kind of keep following these shapes, trimming down. And I'm going to save these little bits because they might come in handy too. I think I like that a lot more now. Yeah, definitely. I think to give that a little bit of shine, make it pop a little bit more, I'm just going to add some pretty concentrated blue, like right in the middle. So it looks like it's a burning star to some degree. I'm just going to take some white, blend out the middle a little bit, just to like give it a little bit of brightness, just a touch, not much. Okay. Yeah, I'm digging that pretty well. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe hide some of my mistake stuff here, like that. This I'm going to go with straight white glue on because it's a very thick paper. It's like really, really thick. Sometimes I will even sand the back if it's too thick, but I think it'll be okay. Just going to add a good deal of glue to the middle. Then I'm going to smear it all over, get it all the way to the edges because you're going to have problems. It's going to be on the edges of everything. So I think I'm going to put that right there. Just kind of hold it down for a few seconds until that glue has a chance to bond. Sometimes I'll put wax paper on top and just stick a weight on top of it and go back to something else. And things are getting bubbly now, you know. That's just how it is with collage. We're going to allow it to dry out later. I'm going to go back to these little bits because I think they're pretty cool. think I'm just going to kind of like have them sort of radiating off a little bit, creating something of a rhythm or a pattern. Again, emulating maybe some light coming from a distant universe or something, or galaxy or whatever they call it. I don't know. I don't teach astronomy, but I don't get enough glue under there. These type of things might be better with stick glue, but I'm going to be stubborn. Feel free to use hot glue too. Just try not to use too much. The texture of the hot glue looks pretty ugly. Okay. Ooh, I got one more bit. Let's do that one. All right, so I'm definitely digging that. Okay, let's come back to maybe this guy and think about where I'd maybe like to put some passages in here. It's kind of looking at what I have here. I really enjoy this stuff. And I'm thinking I've got some good space down here that I could work with, and that could be kind of interesting. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of the same drill that I did before, where I create like a mask by tracing, and then I'm going to cut into this, right? So I'm just going to get a straight up piece of paper. Could be wax paper, could be anything. Just need to be able to see through it a little bit. There we go. Got a bit of an old photocopy piece that is from a logo design. Yeah, so it's a little difficult to see in here. So what I'm going to do is just reinforce some of the line work. Since I'm going to go back over it again later anyway, I'm not too worried about that. So maybe I'll do a shape more like this, right? Gonna have this phone cord continue off like this. So I've got a pretty good continuous line here. Just bolding it up so I can see better. Okay. I might even do this because last time I had a hard time seeing my borders. Let's see, I think I want a more continuous look, so I'm going to go inside of here as well, so I'll trace this out. Not sure what to do about this area, but I'm just going to go with the negative space that I see in here. Looks like there's a little bit of negative space in here too. That doesn't look right. It's going to be actually probably more like that. It must have done something weird when I was tracing there. I'll isolate that necklace here. Okay, so now I've got, come on now. Thank you. I've got pretty good look at what I need to transfer. I can take my piece here, I can lay it over the top. It's not quite big enough. What is this way? That's good. I'm just going to line mine up on the edge here That way I don't have to cut that necessarily. And this time I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move on me. Maybe in a couple of spots. Okay. I'm going to go for the micron pen. I'm going to try to be more precise on this one than I was on the last one. Because it's very colorful, and this is foreground element. It's going to be important that I get it right. Okay. Excellent. I think before I go taking this off, I'm just going to go ahead and connect these straight lines. Make sure I got them right. Down here, it looks like that's going to be from here to here. I'm just going to leave that. I think that's going to be okay. Okay, so now I've got my mask. I know. Whoops, that was a bad idea. Forgot that I had traced over that. There we go. Let's put that back on there. We're good, okay? Rubbed it off. That's okay. I can kind of see it. Let's do this. There we go. All right, so now I'm looking for interesting passages here. And again, I really like this stuff. So I think what I'm going to do is go. That was under here. I think I like that right there. I'm going to go with that. Well, I got to make sure I can get it all the way up. So it's going to be kind of tight. And the shape is really cranky. Let's go like this. So what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with a cutoff corner, but as you can see, that's black. I can paint over that and make that fit in. Okay. Now I'm going to tape everything down really well because this is a very thick piece of paper with a lot of acrylic paint on it. So it's going to take probably several cuts over each line to get this done. And I don't want to mess this one up. It's always a good idea to secure your paper down to whatever mat you're cutting on, in addition to securing your mask on top of it as well. All right, time to go about the tedious work. I think what I'm going to do first is deal with these little interior details, because they seem like they're more challenging. They're weird little shapes, they're curves. I've just learned my working habits. Do the stuff you don't want to do first, or the stuff that seems tedious first. You know, get that stuff that feels like work out of the way so that everything else feels like play. There we go. Got that one. Now we'll get this other weird little interior shape, and then I can do the less cranky shapes. Important to have a sharp X-Acto knife when you have these crazy little shapes. So I don't want it to look like I went after it with a weed whacker or something. Not a bad shape, it could be cleaner. But we can deal with some of that nuance later. You'll notice my paper's moving around a little bit. You know, it's kind of like bubbling up to some degree. If you feel like you can't cut through it twice that way, sometimes just scoring it first and then taking it off so you can see the cut and you can go back through it that second time is going to be better. And then being mindful about what you need to preserve. Like, I'm cutting this out, right? I want to maintain this. So, like, in theory, I don't have to keep this clean, right? So if I have to cut some stuff out and get it out of the way first so that I can maybe have greater access to some of those other areas, I can do that. Like, that's a good example. Like, instead of making that curve, I would just pull this curve in like that. That way you get a good crisp corner. Okay. Because I want a good straight edge, I'm going to go ahead and just use a straight edge for this. Move it around. Okay. Okay. I think I might just put one more piece of tape on here since it keeps coming up on me. Just want to make sure it's not. I don't lose my contours. So I should be able to pop this out, but it looks like maybe I need to reinforce some cuts. Now I'm just going to flip to the back because I can see a little better without all that color, and I can follow the lines that I've already cut. Just this thick watercolor paper that I had and all this acrylic paint. And that's another thing I want you to consider. Like, if you want to prepare your own collage materials, you should. Like, you don't have to rely on stuff you find. Like, you know, you just do a really crazy, abstract, colorful painting in your sketchbook, cut that piece out, collage it up. Do a lot of paper crafts in this class because it's very cost friendly. And you'll find that teaching in the elementary school, like, your budget is a very important consideration. So that was something I always strove to do when I was teaching in public school, was like, how can I do this cheap or free? Or how can I find donated materials, recycled materials, whatever? Or, again, how can we generate our own stuff and make it cheaper to do so? Instead of buying a bunch of really beautifully prepared collage scrapbook paper, make your own. We live in a DIY universe anyway. I'm just going to cut all the way through that business. Cool shape. I might do something with it later. When you're using your X-Acto, try to use the absolute tip. It's the sharpest point. And sometimes it's not about, ooh, there we go. Sometimes it's not about how hard you push, but how clean and smooth you slide through the paper. You can do it multiple times. I'm not going to force that off. I don't want to tear it. There we go. Did that do it? Nope. One cranky little area right here. There we go. All right, sweet. The only thing I have left is to cut my border here. Guess I'm feeling confident. I'm not going to use the straight edge. All right, sweet. It's time to bring the collage back. And I'm going to start placing these things. Get all these other collage materials out of here. Okay. So this would go like a puzzle piece right in here. Now my intention is to glue these things down here and then to come back and model these two figures. This is going to go in here. And this piece looks like it goes somewhere, but it doesn't. This piece does go here though. See, by doing it this way, you know, you can see that my wash on my other piece of paper looks really continuous and not patchy. Like, a good example of that would be, there we go. Like right through here, where there's this like little white and yellow that comes through. Same with like some of the rhythms and patterns that you see coming through here. It creates more continuity, more flow. Looks like I'm missing this little guy, so I need to find that. Hope I still have it. Oh, there it is, I found it. No? Well, I'll come back to it in the interest of getting this thing going. Now again, for this one I'm going to use Elmer's, just because I have, again, watercolor paper is very thick, so I'm going to add a good deal to the back like this, and I'm not really going to water it down. Like, I'm going to use my brush that may have had a little bit of water in it before, but I want to keep this pretty straight. This glue needs to be nice and strong. And I'm just going off the edges, and I'm going to try not to get anything on the other side. Oh, wait. I'm messing up my orientation. Here we go. I'm going to place it. Looks like I did get some there. I'm just going to smear it a little bit. Again, you might have to hold this down if you're using white glue for just a little bit. As you can see, mine's kind of starting to buckle a little as they marry. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll just put a piece of wax paper on top of that, put a big book on it, leave it alone for about 20 minutes, call it good. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and get everything glued down. We get a good look at it, and then I'm just going to put wax paper on the whole thing and a book on it. I'm going to come back to it later this afternoon and work on the other figures. Rubber cement is a lot more friendly when it comes to drying. It's just such a nasty chemical smell. And it's something I never wanted my elementary kids to be using. But if you've got rubber cement, it works great for stuff like this. A dot or a touch of hot glue sometimes too. It's just what the doctor ordered as well. Okay, now I'm gonna find my little collage elements. There's that one. Here's this one. And then I gotta find this weird little one. There we go. Kind of get that smeared. No. Oh no. Looks like I need to brush that out. There we go. That's better. Okay. Place this boy here. Go back and reinforce. Looks like I've got a nasty corner here that doesn't want to stick down, so I'm just going to add a little more glue and stick that down better. I'm going to put way more glue down here, just straight on the corner, because I know that's going to be a problem. Okay. So now I'm gonna place wax paper on top of this guy. I'm gonna let it dry for a bit. I'm gonna come back and continue.